It's Melissa Peters here with DORN Companies, coming to you pain-free live to help you live pain and injury-free. Thank you for tuning in today for another episode of the Injury Prevention Academy, brought to you by DORN Companies, the country's leading wellness-based pain management and injury prevention company, committed to reducing cost of healthcare, workers' compensation, and lost productivity, resulting in over $100 million in savings over the last 20 years for our clients. Joining us today is Tamara Parris. Tamara is the Director of Community Development at Safeopedia and owner of EHS Professionals Group on LinkedIn. Her passion is working with other EHS professionals to collaborate in thought leadership, networking, and connecting our industry peers to resources that will increase profitability and safety practices within their workplaces. Tamara has been in the health and safety field for over 20 years, with her industry experiences including the construction sector, CCTV and security, and commercial retail industries. Prior to entering the health and safety professional field, Tamara was a graduate of Ryerson University's social worker degree program, won 2 leadership awards, and was honored into the Golden Key Society. From 1991 to 2004, Tamara worked as a degree-holding social worker with families and the homeless population to help provide resources to assist with bettering their individual, unique life circumstances. So thank you, Tamara, for taking time to join me today. How are you doing?
I'm very excited to be here, Melissa. Thank you so much for inviting me. I don't know if you heard, but we just got off doing our Safety Connect conference expo. It was 3 days. It was phenomenal. So I'm a bit on still up there from that because we had so much conversation going on, and it's still actually on demand for people who wanted to go see it at industryconnectsafety.com. So I hope you get there.
I definitely encourage all of our viewers and listeners to take a chance to check it out on demand if you weren't able to attend yourself. Dorn was able to exhibit there, and I got to check out the lounge and also got to attend the panel that you did with some other folks. And I have to say, it was quite an experience, and we look forward to the opportunity to attend again next year.
Oh, good. So you did get to do some networking and stuff and getting around there. That's awesome. That's awesome. Because that's what it's about, right? Getting out and meeting people.
It is, and that's going to be a lot of what we talk about, and is a good place to launch because, as we heard in your bio, you're currently the owner of EHS Professional, which is the largest LinkedIn group for safety professionals. So, can you give us, kind of your journey and how you came to own that group on LinkedIn, and just a little bit about your passion about creating community and networks among safety professionals?
Well, when I started out really getting into more of a corporate health and safety environment at Metro, which is a grocery retail across Ontario and Quebec up here in Canada, it was very lonely because I was one safety professional in a store looking after over 150 employees, and the supports for health and safety were up in our corporate office that we didn't really go to and visit much, Melissa. And so what I started to desire as a safety professional was other like-minded safety professionals to go and meet. And so when I was doing that and I was figuring it out, somebody said, well, have you ever checked out LinkedIn? And at that time, I had been on social for other things in other areas like Tiny Chat and stuff like that, but not yet on LinkedIn. So I ventured over there, and that's where I had the opportunity to meet an amazing gentleman by the name of Mark Lovelace. And he became a mentor and really started to share with me his knowledge in EHS professionals as a EHS professional. And that's how I got involved with the EHS professional group. And then afterwards, I became the owner of it because Mark went on to do other things, and then I took it over and nurtured it up to be a community where we come together, we collaborate, we do projects together, and it's really about those of us doing the front line of safety having a place to have real discussions like we do on the safety view. And that's what it's come to. And that's actually how I also met Scott at Safeopedia, was through LinkedIn and connecting and the EHS professionals group. And again, another person in that safety world where we were talking and sharing our passion about safety. So again, it all goes back to those networking opportunities and meeting like-minded people and taking it from there, because there's so much to learn from other people.
And for our listeners and viewers out there, if they wanted to become a part of this LinkedIn community, is EHS Professional the name of the group, or what can they do to get involved with your group?
So if people wanted to get involved in the group, they would go to LinkedIn and they would look up the name EHS Professionals, and it's got a green globe, and they can join there. It's free to
Excellent.
charge. There's no charge. It's free. And the other thing is that they can reach out to myself and get involved in our other community programs like the Safety View, where we gather usually once or twice a month to have conversations with one another on different topics.
Well, I encourage our listeners and viewers to definitely check that out, particularly if you're looking for a community or networking with like-minded professionals, as Tamara mentioned. And when we think of the safety profession, outside of just connecting with one another, a critical aspect of the safety profession's job at a manufacturing site or a construction site or across any field is being able to promote a culture of inclusion and belongingness at their individual sites. So, for our listeners and viewers out there, what can safety professionals do to promote inclusion and belongingness among employees with whom they work?
Um, I'm going to bring it back to the basics. And it's all about really being your authentic self. So, we talk a lot about building trust. We talk a lot about providing people voice. We need to step back in our day to day and really kind of consciously consider, how are we doing? How are we scoring on that? When we go and we talk with our employees and other people in the organization, are we jumping ahead to be heard, or are we pulling back to hear? And what kind of relationships are you developing with other individuals? Because really, the workplace is a community that we go to every single day for many, many hours. And so, if we really want to cultivate a place where people can trust one another, feel safe, and be open, then we have to bring our authentic selves to work. And I think that is the actual secret formula, is allowing yourself to be your authentic self, but in addition to that, allowing others in that workplace space to be their authentic self in an environment where they feel safe to do so openly, whatever that might be for them.
And in some of your experiences, how do you think, what are some tips you might have in creating inclusion among your workforce? Is it about the language we're using when talking to people? Because sometimes I think we can use language in a way that's automatically exclusionary. So, do you have some tips that you found through the years that help to start to create that culture of trust and inclusion and authenticity?
It's an interesting thing that in other areas in our life, a lot of the times we don't find this to be a barrier. When we're sharing in just a personal way our stories, our experiences, it seems to come naturally. And then when it's turning to safety, it seems that we become more formal at telling people what to do, at speaking at people, at trying to ensure people are living in this compliance world. And again, I think it's really about stepping back and asking, what is truly the point that we're doing safety? What is the real value for everybody. And instead of coming at things as I've got a piece of legislation or I have to be OSHA compliant, etc., bring the human to work with you. Talking with people, just sharing stories, let them share their stories back and do that human exchange, because we learn so much better from one another when we're doing that storytelling and sharing. It's actually one of the oldest leadership tools that we have. We were doing it way, way back in prehistoric times, even just sketching stuff out on rocks. And so, returning to that, I know that in my own work, when I'm working with individuals and they're sharing stories with me and I'm sharing stories with them, that's what's helped building that trust and that rapport. It's also disclosing who we are. And then brings back that empathy level. And one of my big concerns, Melissa, is that I'm really noticing that the level of empathy between people is really decreasing. And so, how can we, as health and safety professionals, empathy is one of our strongest gifts. How can we bring that gift more into the workplace? Because when people care about one another, when people are kind to one another, they naturally want to protect and guard. And that's how we can help create a safer environment way before anything happens. Because then we're going to be looking for opportunities of what might be happening in the environment itself that needs to be paid attention to and corrected, as opposed to waiting until an incident or an accident occurs and then trying to figure out, well, where should we point the finger on why this person who is now hurt, we're taking away from that human moment, that person needs more of our comfort at that time, and then take the learnings afterwards when you go back and say, okay, so let's look through it again. Where was the opportunities for improvement so that we can mitigate this or eliminate this from ever occurring again?
Yes, and Tamara, hearing you speak about things like empathy and some of the components that go into being an effective safety leader, how does your background in social work help inform your understanding of these various components?
That's an interesting question, because I didn't know when I began safety that I was doing safety from the lens of a social worker. So it was a very intriguing experience when I walked in, and, my first week or so at work, people are like, well, you're the safety person, so you're responsible for safety. And I kind of looked at them and I was like, excuse me, what? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to follow you around all day while you're working, making sure, checking off that you're doing everything, as safe as possible. So I came at it like when I was working with individuals who had their own life challenges and that came to me as a social worker, is that they had ownership over their lives and what they engaged in the control of what they did. And so I was a resource to help provide whatever they might need, say the knowledge tools, access to resources, etc., in order to achieve that, their life goals as well as they could. And safety is the same thing, is that we go in and we can access resources, etc., that the direct worker may not be able to get or the executive team may not be aware of, and we bring that knowledge to them. But at the end of the day, we have to be collaborating so that we're listening to those who are engaging in the work as it is actually being done, not as we assume it, so that we can help, find solutions to the challenges that they may be facing. In the same with the executive team, listen to the business risks that they're bringing up. And then how can we find various solutions to help eliminate or mitigate those?
I
So
appreciate
again, it's looking at ourselves as a resource and not the compliance police that runs around telling everybody what to do.
Yes, I appreciate that, and seeing the similarities that you can draw from one experience and bring to another. That's all about really creating that humanness. So when it comes to creating a workplace that is truly inclusive of all, we can't ignore the need to talk about diversity.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we know that workforces today are quite diverse, whether we're talking about gender identity, sexual orientation, gender um, as a whole, race, religion. So when it comes to safety professionals, how can an organization work to create acceptance, true acceptance, not just lip service, true acceptance of differing views? And how does that play a role in the safety field?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is looking at those in the environment that are making the decisions. Are you continuously navigating to the same people because they're familiar with you, to you? Sorry, they're familiar to you because you have a relationship with them already. Or are you breaking out and you're bringing in varying people that shows a representation of your workplace on a whole? One thing that frustrates me, Melissa, is what I often see is there'll be a opportunities for discussion for a committee, etc., and we will see the same um, demographic
Hmm.
on that committee, a very high representation, and it doesn't represent the whole workforce. And so I think it's time that we question that. And if we're seeing that, spice it up. Why are we only seeing a heavier number of one demographic? Why are the others not involved or not wanting to be involved? Go speak and find out what would encourage more involvement. Because as leaders, we are responsible for the makeup of these committees and ensuring that we're allowing all to have equal voice. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. And when I think about the safety profession, people out on, a production floor together, people working even, stocking shelves, you find out, maybe you guys don't align on how you see the world. Maybe, you differ in your background in various ways. So for safety professionals out there who are working with a diverse workforce, how do you still promote to them that differences in values or opinions or anything does not mean that you don't make sure that you're committed to keeping that person safe? Like how do we get to the critical nature of making sure that there's an acceptance in the workforce, that there's a commitment to diversity and inclusion, so that we can make sure that all employees are receiving the need a focus on their health and safety?
Again, I think it goes back to opening up dialogue and opening up conversations with people, so that we can learn from individuals. One, people come to the workplace with different perceptions and different values around what is risk and what is safe. And so the first place that we need to start at is, are we both understanding everything in the same way? Because we may not. So my perception of what it means to behave safely may differ from somebody else's. And so that's when we see different types of actions occurring in the workplace, where one person may deem it unsafe and another person may not have assessed it in the same way. And we only know this by, again, when we, as a safety professional, if we hear of something or we see something that doesn't quite line up, opening up that dialogue and understanding what is the perception of the other person, where are they coming from, right? Because it could be also that in their work, the way that they've been doing it for decades, what we think is safe is actually not safe, and we have misunderstood. Or they may be doing a behavior, for example, playing race cars on the power jacks, where they're coming at it like, oh, this is just fun, we're just blowing off some steam, like nothing a big deal, and they're not actually assessing at that time the dangers that could happen by playing race car with the power jacks. And actually a real thing that happened, in my workplace. And again, it was that they didn't really understand the power of the tools. They shouldn't have been using them in the first place, right? So there was even that conversation of, well, hey, wait a minute, how did they get the keys to the power jack? Like, what is the process around here? So maybe that people who aren't trained on the power jack and should not be using them actually can't access them. And then we developed a locking system, and this is when I first came on, right, where they put the keys, because it had never been thought about before in that workspace. And so again, it's like speaking together, learning from one another, what are the potential risks and how can we come together with solutions. I know Nathan Brayman also has some fabulous stories around this. You might want to also interview him one day. He was sharing with me where they were having problems with the drivers, people moving trucks or something, because they could just hop on and get into somebody's truck and drive it, and you're not allowed to do that. And so they wanted to do a lockout on some of the trucks, and he threw it to the truck drivers like, how can we do this? And when we came back, they had actually brought a solution of, those U locks for the steering wheels. So they had their own key for their own trucks and they were responsible for it. And nobody could move their truck without coming and asking them first. Right. And so that again is an example of, like, Nathan was said that at first he was going to go away and try to make a policy or come up with some solution, but he threw it back at the workers and said, well, what would you guys do? And they came back with a solution. So again, opening up that dialogue and learning from different people. And it's a beautiful thing, because then there's buy-in about creating a culture of care and actually wanting to help look after one another, because we're treating them as adults in a
Yeah.
community that they come to every single day for hours. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in our minds, that they're not visitors in the workplace.
Yes, and empowers them in the way that they truly get to be part of the decision making process versus being spoken at. Once again, you're speaking with them. So, something I'm hearing here is it's not always about forcing people to conform to the standards of the workplace, but
Right.
really creating dialogue for the workplace to work with individuals, to allow space for various identities or even approaches of doing the work. Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. I remember when we were talking before, I kind of given an example of one that I had also heard about, where a woman was wearing a sari, right? And then she
Yes,
came to her workstation and somebody had put a fan, because they wanted to provide flowing air because it was hot or whatever, but they happened to put it right next to her workstation, and the sari started to float around, and before it could be grabbed, it was actually in the fan. Again, looking at, before we bring something into the environment, how could that also have an impact on what else might be regularly occurring in that environment? If you know that there's an individual who sits there who does wear a headdress, for their cultural beliefs, then figure out, and you want to put a fan, figure out how to create putting the fan in a place that is safe for everybody and
yes,
respecting everybody's individual safety needs. For example, I also shared with you, we had the similar incident in the bakery, right? With
yes,
people wearing headdresses. And I threw it back to them. I was like, I'm really kind of concerned when I'm seeing your headdress and it floats down, and you're around the batter mixer. And so they said to me, they said, well, can we not get the chef coats that they wear? Because then we could wear that over everything and tuck everything in. That was a very simple solution. It was always already in the environment to access. And the key thing was going back to the individual who was wearing the the garments, right? In order to see, had they already thought about this, which they had, and had they already come up with some possible solutions, which they had. And so there was no money involved. It was no big policy or program to integrate it. It was just a matter of walking over, picking out some of the overcoats and bringing it back and giving it to them. And then that helped create a safer environment for every day when they were coming to work.
Yes, and I always have appreciated more of a bottom up approach to life than a top down. And what
Yeah.
I'm hearing here is that need to go to the people who are actually doing the work. One question that I want to ask, just because I can tell these are conversations you seem to have a level of comfort having, but not everyone does. Some people might say, well, I don't want to offend them, or
Yeah.
what if I come off the wrong way? Do you have, a few tips for listeners or viewers that if they're scared to have a conversation, but they do want to approach it from a place of genuine care,
Yeah.
how can they work to have those maybe potentially difficult conversations?
When I'm preparing to go and talk with somebody about a concern I have, I actually go through the conversation in my own head a few different ways. Melissa, even take a step of getting a friend, a personal friend of mine, to be a sounding board and kind of talk through some of the more sensitive conversations so that I can start to assess as to whether or not the way I'm phrasing something, how's it being interpreted by another person, right? And then kind of gauging it that way. Because for my style, when I'm talking it out with somebody else, sometimes they might point out something that I hadn't thought about, and then I can work that in. So I think it's okay to also go to other people that you trust. And you can, again, there's a like there's a huge network of us out here on LinkedIn. And so that's kind of like what I was doing with Mark Lovelace and what I do with Rosa Corello, my friend who wrote the book, The Relationship Factor in Safety Leadership. You know, reaching, like, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, that is a value add of our time. If you say, hey, you know what, I have a really difficult conversation that I'm needing to have. Can I kind of just have a discussion with you and see what, you know, am I coming at this a really positive angle? Do you have any ideas from your experience? Use other people in the network in order to do that, because that's what networking is about.
Yes,
And
and that,
then when,
yeah,
yeah, and then when you're comfortable, then you can approach the person in comfort.
strength of community goes a long way. So I appreciate that. And I encourage listeners and viewers, if you are one of those people who's looking to have a difficult conversation and need a sounding board, you have a resource now.
Yeah.
So Tamara, one
Can
issue
I
of,
just say
or
one other
yeah,
thing on that? Sorry,
abs-
Melissa.
of course.
So to add on that also, Melissa, that thought is, I have never had anybody on LinkedIn when I have approached them to learn from them, to kick around an idea, say no. So that I just want to give listeners a comfort that people are so genuinely open to engaging in this way, because we all know that it'll help us better ourselves as professionals. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Much appreciated. And I want to dive into something that I imagine a lot of safety leaders have come across, because we have a multi generational workforce. You have millennials, you have baby boomers, you have Generation X. And a recent human resource management study actually found that organizations with more than 500 employees reported that 58% of managers experience conflicts between younger and older employees on a frequent basis. So, from your experiences, what challenges have you seen related to managing a multi-generational workforce? And do you have some advice or tips for safety leaders or other professionals who are dealing with this active kind of generational melting pot within their workforce?
That's an interesting question because reflecting and what I have seen is that often there's a management ideology that we can use one style for everyone. And I've never found that to be true. It's about clicking into if I'm coaching and training individuals on something, different generations and people from different walks of life and backgrounds have different learning needs and learning styles. And so I remember that we got all on to let's do everything over our cell phones. And some generations were really comfortable with that and it took really off, whereas other generations it wasn't what they had been used to, and so they were more hesitant. And so again, tuning in to find out what are people comfortable with and what are people needing a little bit more of a nurturing towards that ideology through that journey of accepting. I think it's okay also to use different styles of coaching and training depending on who your target audience is. It's kind of like marketing in a way, right? Where marketing doesn't just use one medium. They will spice it up and use different places to capture different audiences. So if I'm talking on LinkedIn, I'm going to be sending out my messaging and connecting with people in a different way on LinkedIn than if I was over on TikTok or if I was on Telegram or on Facebook or on WhatsApp. So
Yeah.
it's the same type of thing, right? So and I think the workplace is again made up of people, our community, just like on LinkedIn, TikTok, etc. So again, kind of tuning into when I'm trying to get my these um these ideologies and concepts about wanting to create a safer environment for all. How am I transporting that message? What vehicle am I using, and is it appropriate for the group of people that I'm trying to get the message through?
That was a great way to frame it. I'm curious, just related to safety, the safety field and profession. Have you noticed any kind of pattern differences in how millennials might approach safety and what they want from a safety professional versus how, you know, uh, the baby boomer generation might approach safety and what their safety needs are?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know when I first started safety, and my senior was a baby boomer, it was all more about focused on using paper documents and paper trail. And there was really this ideology that things needed to be on a hard surface, and the training was that way too, right? The training was, okay, we're going to get into a room. I've got this video. I'm going to put this video. I remember a video when I first started, they gave me a video on a VHS to slide into a VHS. And I was kind of looking at this going, I can't believe this is on VHS. They don't have DVDs at the time, right? And I remember it was my first ever training session for this group, and I put it in there, and it was not our generation style, and we all kind of just looked at each other around the room, and then I was like, okay, that's it. We'll take out that's done. We didn't even get 10 minutes into the video where I could just see it was going downhill in the room. And so then, because I I was new, I was told, oh, you can just use this VHS. That'll be good. That's the training. And I trusted them, the person who said that. And, my learning from that is always have a backup plan in your training in case one thing doesn't work that you can hop over. So then what I did was I just kind of spitballed it, and I knew what we had to go through. And so I decided it was part timers. I was working with individuals who were between 17 and 22 years of age. And of course, they were on their phones. And I had to get them off their phones very quick, right? Because I was losing them. And so I started having them go around the store on a scavenger hunt in order to get the things that we needed to learn from the video, but it wasn't going to work that way. And it was the most engaging training session because they were all bringing back their stuff and they had a list of what they needed to be looking for. And I had the DS, excuse me if I'm getting the letters wrong, but you know the book that I'm talking, with all the, because we were doing WMIS at the time, and I had them put them in teams, and it was the funnest training session because that's how they learned, was hands-on, getting right in there. And so then it got around the store about how great the safety training was, that people were actually asking if they could come to safety training too, which management thought was really weird because they had never had that reaction. But again, it was, the video wasn't working. Take the video out, throw it away, and figure out, how am I going to get these people off their phones and engaged? So I think that's the answer right there, is, are you engaging with the individuals that you're trying to share the knowledge with? Check in for movement of engagement, to make sure that you are actually connected with people all the way through your coaching or your training process, and then change it up depending on the audience that you're with.
Well, thank you for that. I do find life is all about being adept at adaptation. I might be about to have a co-host Kat for a second, but this is Todd.
Hi.
So I
I
want to
should go
talk.
get my budgies.
I want to talk as another resource for listeners and viewers out there. I want to mention you host a podcast of your own that tackles some of these issues, safety with purpose, women in safety, and the safety view, along with co-host Rosa Carrillo and Lisa Landy. So can you tell listeners what you cover on these two podcasts and how they can access them if they'd like to tune in?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. Yeah, so both of these shows are really to provide a platform or an opportunity for individuals who are health and safety professionals or in operation management, etc., to come and have a voice and share their thinking, their ideas, new theories, or concepts that they may have read about that they want to talk with other people about. So it's kind of like a hello world, this is what I'm thinking kind of platform for those of us who are in the field doing the work. And so like we hear about like a Sydney Decker concept and whatever, and then bringing it and saying, okay, so how would that actually work in the real world, type of thing.
Okay, and how can they be accessed?
Oh, thank you for reminding me on that. So you would go to safeopedia.com and you can access the audio recordings under the podcast tab. However, we always are wanting people to participate on the shows. So connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email to tparris, Parris, at safeopedia.com. And then that way you can actually be part of the conversation, which is the whole point of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tamara, so much for your time today and your invaluable insight. I learned a lot and really appreciated this genuine, authentic discussion. And of course, we appreciate everyone out there who took time to tune in and listen or view this episode today. And hope you tune in for the next episode. Thank you again, Tamara.
Thank you, Melissa, for having me. It's been really great conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it.